Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us once again. This is day 5 of our 6-day virtual panel discussion series on corporate sustainability and growth. Once again, I am your host, Eric Malice, joining you from, I would say sunny California, but here, if you can see out the window, it's pretty dark. It is 10:30 at night, my time. As every other night this week, I've got my coffee to keep me going. And I want to welcome what will undoubtedly be, once again, a riveting panel discussion. So for those of you who are just joining us for the first time this week, give you a little bit of background on what we're doing. So in this trepid time with coronavirus, many of us have been forced to retreat inward, both in terms of our homes and spiritually. And so what we want to do is ensure that while corporates are reassessing their approaches to business, we maintain a dialogue about what different corporates are thinking with respect to how to most effectively tackle these issues with coronavirus in terms of how they're impacting our business, the economy, innovation, customer development, etc., so that we can make it through this effectively and then together come out the other side even stronger. So this has been brought by our corporate sponsor, CorpGini. CorpGini is a platform for corporates to discover and learn disruptive technology solutions and engage with startups to adopt innovation. There's a platform online to help with this, and alongside that, we have a series of discussions just like this one. The structure will be as follows. We will have 2 parts tonight, just as we have had every other night, where first we'll start off with a panel discussion. The theme for today's panel is workforce productivity in times of crisis, particularly this time of crisis. We will have a moderator moderate that panel who will have some questions, and I will actually be taking some audience questions. So those of you logging in remotely, you have a Q&A panel here on Zoom where you can actually post some questions, and we have a full team in the background who's reviewing the questions to identify patterns and trends, and they're going to funnel them to me to select the questions that are going to appeal to the broadest number of people. And I'll present those to the panel to discuss. Second, after the panel discussion, we have 8 fantastic startups that are going to be presenting their solutions specifically focused on how it might help corporates like you to adapt different solutions to help you in these sort of times. And for that, we'll have a different moderator who's going to walk the startups through maybe one question and then provide a brief summary. One thing I want to note importantly is that we'll send out a couple surveys throughout this process. So we want to get your feedback at the end of the panel discussion just to see where we can improve for our last day, which sadly will be tomorrow. And then also at the end of each startup presentation, we'll pin you a Q&A where you can just select if you want to get more information about that particular startup. They only have about 2 minutes today to present, but for anybody who's interested in learning more about them, we'll be sure to get you connected after this. Finally, I want to then thank the people who are putting this together. So CorpGini is our lead sponsor who's organizing this event alongside with Pantomath and Z Nation Labs. I also want to thank our partners, Bombay Stock Exchange, UC Berkeley Extension, British Deputy High Commissioner, Toronto Business Development Center, Business Standard, among others, and of course Zoom, who's been helping us to make this go as smoothly as possible. And finally, I'll introduce myself. So I am the host of the evening my time, day for most of you. My name is Eric Malice once again. I am the co-founder and CMO of an AI and computer vision startup known as Linkcode Labs, who will actually be one of the presenters this morning for you all, as well as the co-founder of a legal and strategy consulting firm, Talus Partners. I'm an adjunct professor and I teach law and entrepreneurship and done some other things. And I've recently connected with the CorpGini team as an advisor, and I was humbled when they asked me to help moderate this whole event to just help keep people connected and do the small part that we can through this time of crisis. So without further ado then, I would like to introduce our moderator of the panel, Anup Mehta, who is a co-founder of Z Nation Labs. Anup, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. It's Good Friday today, holiday, but unlike other long weekends, we are sitting at home. Nevertheless, let's make most of it. Friends, I'm Anup Mehta, co-founder of Z Nation Lab. Z Nation Lab is a startup accelerator and a fund that partners with growth stage startups to help them scale up. Pantomath Group and Z Nation Lab have launched this corporate innovation platform, CorpGini. Remote monitoring, going digital, and working from home are the norms that the industry is going to follow in the coming days. Technology provided the perfect foundation for the new world and the business order that we are going to witness post this lockdown. it has emerged the vaccine to tackle the effects of COVID-19 on the economy. And for the past 4 days, we have the industry stalwarts express their concerns and share their recommendations on the same with the business community. This webinar series also provided a platform for 24 startups to present their innovative solutions, right from AI-enabled platforms and dashboards to applications that monitor the physical and the emotional health of employees. There is no denying the fact that this lockdown will not only affect the employee psyche, but also their productivity in the short as well as the long run. Today we have with us business and functional heads who are going to express their views on workforce productivity in this time of crisis. I would now like every panel member to give a one-line introduction about themselves. Yeah, start from John, maybe you can start.
Yeah, so good morning everybody. I'm Jean-François Hiller. As you may hear, I'm from France. I am the EVP strategy for Recipharm, which is a Swedish pharmaceutical company. And at Recipharm, we own several manufacturing facilities. We are actually involved in contract manufacturing services to the pharmaceutical industry. We develop and we manufacture products. And in this respect, we have 30 manufacturing facilities and 5 development centers all over the world, including in India, where we employ 3,000 people. So in this respect, I'm traveling to India more or less every month.
Thank you. Ramani?
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Shamni. I'm the financial controller of Teamly Services, one of the largest people supply chain companies in India. So we currently have 2 lakh employees deployed across 3,000 plus clients in the country across all industries and verticals. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. Prior to Teamly's, I was with PwC and Deloitte.
Sure. Shobna, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Shobna. I work as the CIO for the Bombay Dyeing and Manufacturing Company. I've been in the IT industry for almost 20 years now, and I have had previous experience with BSF, Heinz, and Sanofi. So I'm glad to participate in this course.
Thanks. Prakash?
Good morning. My name is Prakash Bhalekar. I am an engineer. I run a company called Padmini Mechatronics that makes automotive parts and clean tech products.
Thanks. Vijay, you want to go next?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Vijay Bhutada, partner at Pantomath Advisory Group. I advise on corporate M&As, cross-border transactions, inbound, outbound, succession planning. I have been working in this space for more than 16 years. And before Pantomath, I was part of PwC. Thank you.
Thanks. We have a couple of more panelists still about to join. Puneet Kaur from Manappuram and Anurag Batra from Business World. We'll let them join. So today we have a perfect mix of panelists from the service and the manufacturing side as well, with a varied workforce ranging from 100 to 5,000 employees. If at the end of this discussion, there is a reasonable clarity on the following, then I would have considered myself to do a good job when it comes to the productivity of the workforce. So if how the productivity should be managed now in these times, how should we go about it when things partially start and then completely start? And how in future we be better prepared for such an unexpected mega crisis? With this, let me ask you the first question. Is it even fair to expect productive work from your team in these times? Just an answer in a yes or a no. Shobna, you want to go for it? Oh, we can't hear you, sorry. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think it's fair to expect productivity from the employees, and I can go in a little bit of detail now.
Sure. Prakash?
Yes.
Ramani?
Yes, for service industry. Yeah.
Vijay?
Yes, for service industry, as Ramani said.
John?
Yes, hopefully we make pharmaceuticals, so we need to be productive currently.
Sure. So even I would go for a yes, but from each one of us, we would like an answer that why yes, we are saying in a sense.
May I pick up?
Yep.
So, I mean, from service industry perspective, it definitely saves a lot of time for, team to even travel. So one is that aspect they can utilize for their work. Second, in any case, most of their time goes in office and or either, meeting clients sometimes. But I mean, working from home, therefore, should not be a big issue. And, technologies like Zoom and other technologies are available to kind of, discuss and deliberate on many things along with the team and clients. So I don't think it's an issue for service industry people, at least, to be productive. Rather, they can focus more because they are alone at home. And I think, yeah, that's the reason I say yes.
Ramani?
Yes, Anup. So I believe for service industry, as of now, there hasn't been any major impact on productivity because of the fact that most of our operations are anyhow done remotely through calls or by way of technology related solutions. So there are few functions which got affected, like sales, the feet on street sales guy, or people who have to be implanted at client location. So there are few functions which got impacted. Otherwise, at overall, the day-to-day operations, as of now, we haven't seen any kind of disruption in any major service industry yet.
Sure. Prakash, you would like to give a different perspective.
You're telling me or you're asking me?
Yeah.
You're telling me to give a different perspective or you're asking me?
We're in the manufacturing side of things, so that's why.
No, I think obviously on the shop floor nothing can happen, so you can't affect productivity there. But everybody who's not tied to making the product physically can be productive, and I think there's a lot of thinking that doesn't happen when things are running full steam. And what I found is there's a lot of collective thinking and learning from past that we can do when you have this downtime. So maybe the productivity measure for today is not okay, but the investment in time and thinking will pay off in the future.
Sure. John, you want to take that?
Yes, I think from our perspective, it's mandatory that we maintain our production facility open and that we deliver goods. We are losing productivity currently mostly because the employee face difficulties to join our facility, which is remain open as an exception by law, and we also suffer from some constraints on the amount of people that we can have on site set by the authorities. So the productivity is impaired by the availability of labor.
Sure. Shobna, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Prakash there, right? Particularly for say the manufacturing industry, where the physical presence at times is really required. I think this is the best time to relook at your policies, relook at your processes, relook at things which you would normally not get time for. We find these complaints from corporates every now and then that you don't get time, for doing a lot of things. So this is probably the time that you can use to realign your processes, do a little bit of thinking, or put in some optimization measures, which could help you in the long run once the operations are back to them.
Sure. So my answer to this also would be a yes. And I would say that one has to accept that this will be a new normal for some time now. So there is no option but figure out new innovative ways to get productive out of this, right? So this leads to the next question. A lot of our audiences are MSMEs in India. So what advice would you give specifically to them to quickly come out of this situation and make up for the productivity losses during the lockdown? So how should they look at the situation and come out of this and make for it? So yeah, anyone can take this first. Prakash?
So we are in the boat and we have to actually physically answer the question that you're asking. But unfortunately, I don't think there is any formula. We just have to react rather than be proactive, because we don't know which parts of the country will open up, which suppliers in our supply chain will be able to get their workforce back. So there's so many variables and none of which you can predict, that we are focusing on being agile and and being sure on what priorities we want to get off the ground first.
Right.
So there's a lot of checklists that float around in the WhatsApp and internet on how to start up a factory. But for me, I think our focus is to we've shortlisted a list of customers that we have to service for various reasons, and then we are focusing on making sure that we can deliver that, and the rest we will just have to adapt as the situation evolves.
Sure. Shobna, you want to take that?
Yeah. So I think for MSMEs, what they can use at this time is possibly plan out things, okay, which they have not completed yet, right? All the uncompleted tasks is something that they need to focus so that once the operations are back, okay, how soon they would be able to complete their existing tasks. That is one. Okay. Secondly, they could reach out to their existing and potential customers today, right, to see how they can, leverage once the operations are back to normal and plan out those things. Use this time for doing that. And lastly, I would say they could put a pause on some of the unnecessary or unrequired type of expenditure that maybe the company may be having today, because there would be definitely a pressure on costs once things are back.
Makes sense. Vijay, you want to take that?
Yeah, so as far as manufacturing industry is concerned, I know that they can't do much things right now, at least in terms of their factory and producing the goods. But what they can definitely do is planning for the future. For example, once they start, it is important to ensure that the critical raw materials are available on time, and therefore it is important to kind of talk to those suppliers and be prepared for that. The other thing is you can do other plannings. Third is your operating people or engineers. They can kind of ponder upon what better ways and means they can use to improve their productivity when they start again, so that part of the impact of lockdown can be kind of reduced to that extent by being able to produce more when we start. So these are some of the things they can do. As far as service industry is concerned, we can focus a lot more on innovation. Keep thinking what your clients would need in the current scenario as we move forward, and keep innovating, developing some products, and sharing with your clients even during this time, so that when we really start, we can focus and start with a much more vigor.
Sure. Any views, John, Ramani?
Yeah, yes,
Yes.
I think currently we are working with 40-50% of labor, which is allowed to reach the site. So we have to manage the situation with the remaining of the people that they can work remotely, which means, and we probably develop this later in this discussion, which means a larger empowerment and a different mindset in collaborating with people to make sure that the work is done.
Sure.
So just to add to what other panelists had said, as an advice to MSME, we would like them to focus more on working capital management at times like this, because cash is going to be the king for next few months. Banks will put a lot of pressure on ODs, CCs, and in case if they, if their regular working capital cycle goes out of the normal phenomena, like if collections get delayed and all, there'll be a lot of pressure in maintaining the day-to-day operations. So the immediate measures which the MSME segment has to take is on cost reduction and working capital management, all discretionary spends to be cut. And usually for MSME segment, there are lots of things that they want to do, be it automation, innovation, training to people, for which they may not be able to find time in the past. So they should make effective use of this time to train those people, to upgrade their systems, to innovate their processes and rethink.
Sure, makes sense. So my next question, I think, is almost there and answered. Like, how can brick and mortar businesses make optimum utilization of their employees where the nature of business requires physical presence? Say, example, real estate or manufacturing and others. So I think it has been answered, but if there is some specific advice out there, especially from maybe Shobna, John, or Prakash, that would help most of our manufacturing and real estate kind of businesses.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the people who are not necessarily required to be on the production workshop. and who can work remotely. And I think it's a terrible learning to learn to work in distance, particularly in India, where the mindset is very focused on hierarchy and controlling with relatively limited empowerment. But when the people are remote, you need to empower them much more, and you need to focus on the deliverables. And it's a different way of working, it's a different mindset. And I think this is a key element of that when you work with 40% of your labor on site.
Makes sense. Shobna,
Yeah,
anything from your side? Been involved in textile, and the group is also in real estate. So,
yeah.
any advice?
So I think, the Prime Minister also made a statement some days back that the social distancing doesn't mean it's an emotional distancing, right? It's a time that you need to actually keep engaged with your customers to find out what exactly are their requirements, how are they getting fulfilled today, and what we could do further to align all those requirements in future. So this is the time that the company would use to get into that level of details with the customers and keep them engaged.
Sure. Any advice from you, Prakash, specifically? So you're on mute, Prakash, once again.
No, nothing general.
Sure. So more it comes out to be like communication and planning is something that can be surely taken up in these times when we are planning when it opens up, right? So when it opens up, right, what would be the readiness measures the corporate should take now so that to ensure a fearless work environment for the employees to return back to work, right? So this is something which I think is a question we should all answer or work towards now. So what would your take be, and what will be the measures which we have already started to take? So if you can share some light in your own organizations also, that would be of help. Ramanish, you want to take that?
Yes, Anup. So even after the restrictions around lockdown are relaxed, our plan is to continue few teams to work from home, because we have seen that there has been no disruption or no impact on productivity of many teams, like the payroll processing team, which is the largest team in our company, the finance team, HR, marketing. So there has been no impact in their productivity. So we have given clear instructions to these team members that for next 20 to 30 days, irrespective of the next steps on lockdown, that they can continue to work from home. As I said earlier, there are few teams, few functions like sales and others where their physical presence is important. So we might start with them. So again, we'll also try to see as much of, converting as many meetings into digital meetings by using platforms like Zoom and others. And even the sales pitches, marketing pitches, all of those we are trying to do more into digital phenomena.
Sure. So more towards where again there is a physical presence required, right? What we all feel that there are going to be changes which will need to be done in order to get that comfort level back for us and for everyone, right? So if we can also focus on that aspect, maybe Prakash, if you want to take that, how would you go about doing that in your factories and offices otherwise?
So there's two types of fears I think we have to deal with. One is the health fear. I mean, people are going to be very aware of this social distancing. So work space has to be sanitized, so to say. And the second fear, I think, is the uncertainty and job security kind of risks. So on the health risks, I think there are very, very solid prescriptions that everybody is making on how to ensure that you don't transmit and you detect people who are likely to be sick. On the job security and uncertainty part, I think it's much more difficult. It requires engagement, and when decisions have to be made, to make them quickly so that people are not continuously wondering what's going to happen to them.
Sure, makes sense. Vijay, you want to take that?
I mean, already Prakash has covered that part, which is very important, that communication with employees during this time is very, very important, apart from the health measures, which I think all of us will anyway stay to ensure the safety. Maybe, some of the practical things we can do is to kind of, as Amani also said, as far as possible, if people are not required in office for some more time, we can ask them to work from home. And those who are required to come, maybe, ask them to avoid public transport, pool the vehicles and come together, so that at least that safety precautions are taken care.
Sure. And also on the adjustment of the workplace, I think what you all think that, we will have to change in your offices, etc., in the factories. So maybe something on that front, if we can just, let the audience know that these are the basic things which everyone should plan to do. Like Shobna, if you want to take that, or John.
Yeah, so this is the right time to actually realign your production line, your production processes, because there's been a downtime, okay, which you would otherwise normally not get, right? So that's one way to look at it. Okay. Also, from a business priority perspective, there, because of the sudden lockdown and the unprecedented lockdown, there would be a readjustment or realignment of the business priorities. Right, so it is required that all the leadership as well as the employees understand what the realigned business priorities are, so that they align their roles accordingly. So these are the two things that come to my mind.
Makes sense.
So
I'm going to just jump in really briefly. Shobana, it was a little bit hard to hear you. Just in case anyone in our audience wasn't able to hear, if I may just briefly reiterate, the 2 points that Shobana said was, one, this is a good time to realign the production line and look at efficiencies from an operation perspective. And second, it's a good time to reassess business priorities and ensure that people in the workforce, from leadership all the way down, have clear clarity on the priorities going forward. Just in case anyone didn't hear that. But
thanks,
Ramani, I think you were about to jump in with something. Please continue.
Yeah, I just want to add one more point, especially for service industry. I think once the lockdown restrictions are cleared, we should also consider the flexible working hours and working in shifts to avoid the crowded office space. And also from an employee's point of view, now that all schools and daycare centers are shut and where both the parents are working, there has to be someone at home to take care of their kids or elders if they have to look after some other dependents. So we also have to think from employee point of view and give the flexibility work option for employees even once we start working from office.
So makes sense. So yeah, I agree with that completely. So if we talk and think about this current phenomena, right, like our business getting a sudden heart attack without any prior symptom, right? So what precaution as a business owner you would take when such a next attack comes in place, right? So what could you do now on, which could be like saving you from that sudden attack? So anyone would want to take that. Vijay, you want to go first?
I think first and foremost would be managing your liquidity. I mean, having a good cash reserve is so important, especially during time like this. So that is one aspect which I think all across sectors one need to look into it. The other is, having the facilities and infrastructure to work from home for more and more team members. So that is another important aspect. And third, I would say for manufacturing companies, automation is a key. So as much as they can automate using, the new robotics and IoT techniques, that will kind of be a great savior for them during crisis of this time.
Makes sense. Again, the point of technology. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shobna, you want to take that?
Yeah. So I think it also boils down to the enterprise risk management in organizations, and how seriously have organizations actually looked at an enterprise risk management perspective, right? Because these are unprecedented circumstances, and it is the risk management policies of the organization which can actually look at what would happen if a second heart attack, like you mentioned, right, was to come, and what do we do one to prevent it from coming itself, like. Take it medical terms, it's a heart attack. So, you should go for annual medical checkup. You should do your diagnosis or preventive medicine first so that you don't end up to the, situation of a heart attack, right? But ideally what I'm trying to tell is, look at the risks that are there with the business, and these are risks that will be there with us in modern times, right? So that is where the planning and the risk management capabilities of the organization will be tested in the long run.
Sure. Prakash, you want to take that?
No, so I think you cannot prepare for these events, no? But like if you compare it to a heart attack, then yes, whatever you need to do to avoid the heart attack, stop smoking, start exercising, stay lean. Those are the things that you have to do.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
I think we don't want to plan for another crisis like this. We want to avoid it as a society and as a nation and as a global community. So across the board, I think we should look at how to avoid such meltdowns.
Sure. John, anything from your side?
I would reinforce what Prakash has said. Heart attack is predictable in most of the case. In most of the case, you have signals in advance. So I think here it was predictable, but it was deeply unexpected. Can we foresee, will be provocative here, can we foresee all the unexpected events and be prepared for that? I'm not sure. So yeah, it's a crisis, we have to manage it. Can we prevent the next one? Yeah, probably with more international healthcare cooperation, maybe in rearranging the supply chains, maybe there are plenty of measures that could be considered in the way the world is organized. But it's very difficult to have a simple answer to this question, I would say.
Makes sense. So, but we all agree to it that there are measures which we need to seriously look at and work towards, right? So in that way, what should be the real extent of it? So if we put in a lot of resources and investment to prepare for such kind of a situation in future, when the history is saying that this is like once in 100-year kind of an event, and with this analogy,
the
next crisis would come in maybe after 100 years, and which may be totally different, right? So how do you prepare for something like this? As we said, this is an unknown territory. So to what extent and in what manner then we should really try to face this as a challenge going forward?
What I can say is that in 2009 there was a risk on the H1N1 flu pandemic, and in France the government has spent a huge amount of money in buying masks and vaccines and so on, and it was so criticized that in 2012 the government decided not to put any resource behind the prevention of pandemic. So doing too much at one time can bring to another extreme, which means that today we are completely unprepared. So there is a need of finding a good balance here.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Anu, the need of the hour is not throwing more chefs into the kitchen. It's a different recipe. So it's not about throwing more resources after the pandemic in preparation to the next crisis. So we have to think about our businesses differently. Like wherever possible, we try to de-risk in terms of dependency on or concentration with few industries or few clients, few supply chains or few locations in terms of your operations. So we have to think about having a more diversified portfolio in all sectors, be it your supply chain or your clients or your employees, your own operations, factories, everything. And the second one is to think about your overall cost structure. Try to have more of variable costs, which you can plug in or plug off quickly in line with how the economy is trending. So, I mean, just to give you an example, one of the major costs that companies have is an employee cost. And many Indian companies traditionally, for them, employees means only full-time employees. So now it's the time for them to start thinking about 6 different buckets: full-time employees, outsourced employees, which includes temps, third-party temps and retainers, freelancers, part-time employees, trainees. So they should think about all these other possible human resources that they can make use of. So we need a different recipe. It's not throwing more chefs into the kitchen.
Sure, but any kind of contingency plan or some kind of reserves you think someone should think of making for these kind of events in future, right? So Prakash, Shobna, anyone, if you have some thought process in your own companies, if you would go forward to face these kind of challenges, what that could be and to what extent?
So what I would say is, possibly all, even individually, all of us, have something like a corpus fund, okay, a fund which we use only when, there is an emergency that, we have. Okay, all of us do it even within our own families, right? So it's the same with the corporate. So I would say don't overdo it, okay, because it's not an event which happens every little while, but it's something that will help you when such an adversity occurs. And God forbid if the adversity occurs. If the adversity does not occur, then you always have the funds that you can reuse to use in your other business investments, right? So it's something that the organization will need to trade off in terms of, the corporate funds that can be used.
Sure. Prakash, Vijay, anything on this before we move on to the audience questions?
No, I think most of it is covered. So situations like this cannot be predicted. And what we really need to do is, kind of try and de-risk, have some kind of reserve for such situations. And I mean, obviously, we don't need to overdo because any kind of overdoing, as Jean-Francois mentioned, is also going to be, another extreme we can see then.
Yeah, makes sense.
I just read one news article yesterday, Anup. Wimbledon pays $2 million insurance premium for cancellation, and they've been paying it for last 15 years. So far they paid 30 million towards that premium. And when the event finally got cancelled now, they received 130 million as an insurance cover. But how many companies and businesses can afford to pay premiums like this for these kind of events?
Absolutely, yes. That is something what one cannot plan for, and I think we all agree. John, you had some perspective before.
No, I think yeah. I think what we need to do is to have more empowerment in our production facilities and in our labs, in a way that the remote working condition, the home working, can become a relatively wide solution in the business, and this would allow a different way of life and a different life balance for the people. This would allow maybe more efficiency, and yeah, this would make us better prepared if this happens again.
Prakash, anything on this, or we can move to the audience questions? Otherwise, Eric has a lot of questions, I suppose.
No, I think you can move to the audience. Nothing new to add.
Great. Eric, would you have some of the audience questions put up?
Absolutely. So we do have a number of questions from the audience, and a number of them relate to the particular sectors of manufacturing and service. So we spoke earlier about the question that was asked, should this impact productivity expectations? And people universally said no, and particularly with the service industry. So first question on service, and then second on manufacturing. In the service industry, whereas people can still serve others remotely, in order to actually understand who might make a good team member and properly qualify someone through an interview, having a more interpersonal interaction is really important. So how should companies think about hiring and ensuring cultural fit and maximum productivity if given these new changes in times with the coronavirus? And before we answer that, I'll just mention we're now pushing our first poll. So if you should see a number of pop-ups on your screen, just a couple of them actually over time. So please, we encourage you to respond just so we can gather more information about engagement. So I'll turn that question to the panel.
Anyone? Shobna, you want to take that, or Ramani?
Sorry, I just lost for a minute. Can you please repeat the question for me? Sorry.
Sure. So we're all of us are talking about how we're going to move more remote, right? Particularly in the service industry where you don't need people in a factory. And through that, we know that we can still hopefully engage customers and provide high quality service. But when it comes to hiring, when it comes to choosing the people who are going to be on your team, even if they're working remotely, it still can be challenging to identify cultural fit and the best applicants without having that in-person meeting. So what are some strategies or tips that companies can take when it comes to hiring, HR, culture, given these new changing parameters around social distancing?
Yes. So Eric, we are a HR service company, so we outsource people to our clients. So at any given point in time in a month, we hire about 10,000 to 12,000 people. And obviously being a temp employee force, there'll be attrition also to the tune of 6 to 8,000 a month. So is it possible to do physical interviews of 10,000 employees every month? Definitely no. So that's when we figured out that for majority of these interviews, which are at mid to junior levels, physical interview may not be that important. Definitely at senior level, at leadership level, it's very crucial to understand the cultural fit, to assess the person, to assess the leadership qualities of the person well. It's very important, but for majority of the jobs at junior and mid level, all the assessments and interviewing can be done completely digitally. And that's what we have been doing for the last 10 years. And our clients are happy about the interview process, the hiring that we do completely digitally. Like there are assessments, online assessments and physical, and the interviews are also conducted on mobile app, on web apps available. So at senior level, definitely it can be a challenge for some time, but I don't see any kind of challenge for mid and junior levels.
Got it. So your main point is that while this will pose a challenge at senior levels, at junior levels, current forms of technology should lend themselves appropriately to hiring the right fit.
Yes.
Anyone have any different thoughts? Otherwise, we'll move to the next question.
I would say that it's also a balance of technology and face-to-face meetings. I think when the people are regularly interacting each other physically, it's much easier for them to work also remotely.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is specifically geared toward the manufacturing sector. So we know that there's been a significant slowdown to the entire supply chain globally. Hopefully, this pandemic will subside through social distancing and other pharmaceutical and medical improvements. So the question is really forward thinking. When we're looking at when the supply chain is going to restart, how should we think about the necessary actions to actually restart the global supply chain effectively, and what role can perhaps different companies play? And the second part to that question is anticipating the likely gaps that are going to happen when that supply chain picks off. How should businesses, particularly small and medium enterprises, adjust to those gaps that are inevitably going to be there in the supply chain? So how can we restart the supply chain? And how can we plan for those gaps that are going to be in the supply chain and still survive?
I think it's a very important question. For instance, in the pharmaceutical industry, we have the API production, which is in many of the chemical production, in many cases made of multiple steps. It could be 10, 15 steps. And this production can spread sometimes over a couple of months. So if it happens that, for instance, in China, there was a break of 3 months at the beginning of the year, it could happen that we currently receive the finished products, but that somewhere during the year, there will be a stock out of intermediates that will not allow them to manufacture the finished product. And then there will be a stock out. So restarting the supply chain is a very difficult exercise. And I think we need to have a complete understanding of the different steps in our supply chain to make sure that material is available at the right place at the right time. And I think reinforcing our view on the supply chain will bring much more reliability on the one side, and also talking about liquidity, probably a side effect will be a much better control of the working capital.
Yeah. Shobna, you had a point?
So I think, the supply chain has a lot of dependencies and a lot of players. So there's not one single magical formula that's really going to, address all this difficulty, right? But a lot of collaboration with the existing suppliers of your raw materials, right? To make sure that the raw materials are available in your factory for the manufacturing of the goods, right? A lot of collaboration will be required with the suppliers, right? To ensure that the supply chain will come back into place. Also, on the other side, there's also the transportation, right? So one is the supply of raw materials, the other is the transportation of the goods that may be already manufactured and ready within your factory, right? So there is going to be a lot of work that will be required to restore the supply chain functions and the manufacturing functions.
Sure. Anyone
Okay,
else?
great.
Any other point, Eric? Otherwise, we can take a few more questions, I guess.
Sure. So moving more to the financials and the economics, there's a few questions around the cost dynamics. So fixed costs that companies have, in some cases, they're going to be dealing with a loss. Many companies are trying to get out of certain fixed costs, but for the most part, they're stuck with those. So the question is, as we're moving more toward variable costs, when it everyone knows that this is a good idea, particularly in sectors where you have large overhead. Are there any specific strategies that anyone has about how to actually move more to variable costs? And then specifically a sub question for Shobhana, because you touched on this earlier. Is there any formula or general guidance you have when it comes to contingency planning on this topic?
Okay.
Yeah, Shobhana, you can go for it. Go for it, Shobhana.
Okay. So I variable perspective if I come from a technology background, I can say that in technology there are a lot of things that you can move from a fixed cost into a variable cost. In today's scenario, that's completely possible, and that's what is recommended. To minimize the financial flows, like Ramani also mentioned earlier. How do you move from your fixed cost to variable? So that's something that organizations should look at in terms of their spending.
Sure. Vijay, Ramani, you want to add to this? Anyone?
Yes, Anup and Eric. So we should look at clinically assess each and every cost item and try to see wherever we can variabilize, starting from, say, you can even start from laptops. Like few years back, we used to buy all desktops and computers, and later we moved to a complete lease model. Maybe, if you take the total EMIs that you pay over 3-year period for a laptop, yes, we pay a slightly higher value, but it helps us to variabilize our costs completely. So whenever we want to shut down an office, or because of technology enhancements, if our productivity of people goes up and if we have the leeway to reduce the headcount, with all those fixed costs locked in earlier, it used to be a problem. But now that it's completely variabilized, be it your office space, your furniture, computers, including your servers, now everything is moved to cloud. So we have to clinically assess each and every line item in your financials and see whatever extent that you can variabilize. And sometimes there are costs which are variable in nature, but they are very difficult to cut down. Like as I said earlier, the full-time employee cost is something which is it is defined as a variable cost, but it's extremely regulated to have any kind of reduction because of the labor laws that operate in the country, and also the human aspect to be taken into consideration. So that's why I said earlier that companies should start thinking about all other HR avenues that they can resort to, be it apprentices, trainees, part-time employers, freelancers, retainers, outsourced staff.
So there's a lot of work stored for you in the coming time.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Sure.
Any
Eric,
other comments on that? Otherwise, we have a couple more questions.
Go for it.
Okay, so next question. India is known for a lot of things, right? It's known for service industry, IT, and it's also in a lot of ways known for manufacturing and exports. And so a couple questions we've gotten are about how people who are in export or manufacturing businesses are going to handle what happens once COVID-19 settles. Because even once it settles, still countries like China, Italy, Spain, and the United States, which might be frequent export targets for Indian manufacturing companies, they're still going to have a lot of post-pandemic issues to deal with. So what advice does anyone have on the panel for how you can properly prepare for what happens even when the crisis subsides, if many of your customers might be in the very same countries that are highly affected by COVID-19?
So here I can take the point because I'm working actively on this currently. What I have seen over the last 3 weeks and it's valid in India, it's valid in Europe, and in particularly in France. 3 weeks ago, the government were interested in what we were doing because we were exporting. And they were very happy that we were exporting 90% of what we were making in India, for instance. Nowadays, and it has changed dramatically, everybody is concerned, and the authorities is concerned about the domestic supply. And there will be a dramatic change in the expectations of the various governments in the coming months. And I think we have, as industrial organization, we have to prepare plans and to help the government to adjust their strategies in this respect. And I think the availability of pharmaceutical in each domestic market will become a main concern from the authorities in multiple countries.
Sure. Prakash, you have any perspective? You are into exports also, I understand. So how would you look at this scenario?
I see, I mean, this is not only for export, but I see for sure there's going to be a big reduction in demand across the board, except probably pharma and associated health products. But in our business, we are forecasting a minimum 25 to 30% reduction in demand. And the company has to align its resources to fulfill that demand. And the larger question is, when do we expect that demand to come back? And we don't know the answer to that.
Sure. Eric, you have any more questions? Or I can get back to the final.
So I have, I was going to ask one closing question for everyone, but Anup, if you had the same thing planned, then I'm happy to defer to yours. Otherwise, I have one ready.
No, go ahead.
Sure. So panels, so this has been a fantastic panel. Really appreciate the honesty and the candor that everyone has provided. One of the things that I think is really helpful for people listening to a panel is specificity. So, you know, frequently the ideas when it comes to a high level, a lot of people share. So the final question, and this would be for each of you to maybe provide some closing thoughts. If you could share something specific, and don't worry if maybe it's not applicable to every industry, but specific to your experience, your company, your industry, of what you would recommend companies to really focus on at this time. And one suggestion I have is think about, imagine we're 6 months from now. Coronavirus is settled, hopefully, the economy is picking back up, and now all these companies are in an opportunity, they're in a position where they were like, okay, we had this opportunity to reflect. I wish I did this one thing better. What would you say specifically might be that one thing that you think many people might be wishing they did better that perhaps they can start focusing on right now? So we should get through everyone. Feel free to chime in, or I'll let Anup call on people. As a law professor, I'm very experienced what it's like to call on people in the audience, but I won't subject you all to that myself. I'll let Anup do the honors.
Yeah, Shobna, you want to go for that?
Yeah, I just lost a bit of the question, but what I understand is what is that one thing that you would like to focus on during these times is what I understand the question was.
Yeah, please.
Right? So
more or less, yes.
I think what we have also done internally as a team is we have set some goals specifically for April, right? Because we know the team is not going to be in the office, and there are going to be disruptions there. So we have specifically aligned few things that we know that we will deliver in April, okay, and which can be done remotely. Right? So this is the way we have identified with various teams what can be specifically done during this period of lockdown, and that is what we are focusing on to finish by the time we are back in office.
So one thing which we are right now focusing a lot at our company level is digitalization of the processes and tools that we have. So, I mean, even in the past, we did that, but it's very limited. And over the last 20 days, the experience that we had in last 20 days, what we learned is majority of teams, they can work remotely, they can work from home and still be productive. So then why are we spending so much on overheads? Why are we spending so much on the seat costs? If we can bring down those overheads and seat costs and enable people to work remotely either from home or from client location and still be productive. I think, I mean, at our end, I wish that we could have made better investments in automation and digitalization. And I going to spend next 6 months of time more towards driving that strategy.
Sure. Vijay, you want to take that?
Yeah, from service industry perspective, what I think it's important is to engage your people with people more and more. And one way we have found out is to give them more challenging work, more work which will help them to apply their mind and innovate new things, which obviously ultimately help us and our clients to do some better things. But at the same time, it kind of boosts morale of employees also, that they are in such a time also they are going to do some challenging work. So that is one thing we are doing.
Sure. Prakash?
No, we had this discussion also, and it is we had a very interesting response. So it's now 2.5 weeks. We are all stuck at home, and most people responded that even though they're at home, they haven't spent enough time with their families. The child's in this room doing online school, and the wife's in another room doing online work, and so it's I think a great missed opportunity. So
Makes sense.
that's what we would do better. I think at the end of the day, no amount of preparation is going to help us deal with what comes better, but the opportunity to spend time with the family will not come back.
Sure. John, you want?
No, yes, I think the first comment I would make is that in 6 months' time, the situation will not have settled down. So maybe the confinement will not be so strict and there will be different kind of measures, but we should not expect that it's a 6-month story. Yeah. I think currently I'm taking a lot of initiatives, a wide range of initiatives to prepare the future, to fix problems, to catch opportunities and so on. And when the situation will settle down, I will really wonder why I didn't went faster to the right one. But it's very difficult to identify the right ones and to make a selection when you are in the exploring phase. But
sure. So I also agree with most of them, right? At Z Nation Lab and CorpGini, we've been working for last 2 weeks for 18 hours a day, all of us, and we're doing that. But at the same time, my family business is into real estate, and that's where we are not even doing a couple of hours of work. So there is this challenge industry-wise, right? So we have to live with it, I guess, Eric. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, then I would just like to say thank you, everyone on the panel, for joining.
Before you have that, Eric, I just written down a quote. So I would just like to say that and then thank it, if you don't mind.
Please, please.
So yeah, this is a quote from Saint Francis of Assisi. So what he says is, start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. And this was told by him in the 12th century, I understand. So this, according to me, seems to be the perfect way forward when it comes to deal with the current situation. Understand what is practically achievable, set the right expectations, and one shall overcome this. And I keep telling this to myself and everyone, that this too shall pass. So on ending on a positive note, I think I would like to thank once again all the panelists to being a wonderful panel, and would once again hand over the charge to Eric and then Amit. Thank you very much, all of you.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting
So
us.
Anoop, I'm quite touched. Actually, that's I love that quote. Actually, it's a really powerful quote that applies whether you're talking about industry or relationships, whether it's spiritual or it's love or anything else. I mean, it's a really powerful mantra that's withstood the test of time. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for all of the panelists for a really insightful discussion. Just a few notes I took that some points I want to highlight for everyone. A couple takeaways that I thought were interesting is people pretty much unanimously agreed that despite the setback with coronavirus, productivity should not suffer. And of course, that is more aspirational than it is a reality. But when it comes to the expectations of our employees, I think that sentiment really reflects who we are as people, right? That we are comfortable with adversity as a human species. We've faced adversity in the past and we will in the future. And at the same time, we don't lower our standards, we continue forward. And I believe that's essential for any business and for us as the entire human race. We also talked about using this time to really truly innovate. And innovation, as we all know, it doesn't come from desire, it comes from necessity. So opportunities like this, if they can help us understand where we truly need to be better, perhaps in that we will all grow. Despite these insightful, thoughts, at the end of the day, cash is king. So it's really important to make sure that we understand how can we reduce our fixed costs, maximize variable costs, and ensure that we don't go out of business. And so it's important to balance this sense of optimism and hope with the true reality and ensuring that we're making strong decisions to maintain necessary cash flows. And then finally, the thought I took away was, let's look at what processes we can reflect on so that we're ready to scale. So when we come out of this epidemic, predicting what some of the difficulties might be, how can we predict them in advance and really come through stronger? So once again, I really want to thank from the bottom of my heart the panelists for joining. It's been a real honor. So now with that,
Thank you.
we're going to move to the second phase of our event. So what we're going to do right now is first, I'm going to introduce my good friend and co-founder of Z Nation Labs, Amit Jain. He's going to speak very briefly about CorpGini and also just sharing some thoughts that they've been working behind the scenes diligently, speaking with various corporate startups, investors, and consumers, understanding some general takeaways. And he's going to share a few of those takeaways for the benefit of the audience. Then that should just be very brief. Then when he's done that, we're going to return to the final phase, which is the startup pitches. I will then introduce the startups. They will present on their solutions as they might directly benefit many of you as the corporates or anyone else in various sectors that are looking to sustain and grow your businesses despite this epidemic. So with that, once again, thank you, Anu. Thank you all of the panelists. And I will now turn it over to my friend, Amit Jain.
Hi guys. Hi everyone. Good morning in India and good evening.
Good morning.
Hi, Amit. Good evening.
Hi. Thank you. That was a really wonderful panel discussion. I think we touched about lot of real life situations, lot of real life crises, which how you are practically dealing with. And I think that is a kind of a motto behind what we started doing this. What I would like to do is quickly share few kind of slides, couple of slides just for the benefit of all the audiences. And then we'll just jump into the startup discussion. So yeah, this has been a wonderful panel so far. We've got appreciations from so many corporates that we are humbled. And we want you to send your suggestions, comments, feedback on how we could do it better. We started this as a very small initiative, but now we have a series of panel experts, hundreds of startups, and kind of 5,000 plus corporate members who have now been part of this initiative, what we started a week back. And this by far has been the India's largest virtual corporate innovation gathering to fight against Corona. We're trying to talk on kind of real life problems, what could be the practical solutions, trying to deal with this in our own way. I hope this will be a fruitful for all the audiences who are kind of listening, and please send in your suggestions for us to do it. Do you want to move to the next slide? Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow we have 2 panel discussions, and we'll have just 3 startups kind of talking in middle of, or kind of pitching in middle of these 2 panel discussions. We have some heavy hitters from the market now this time. We've been talking on the industry side for the last 5 days, but tomorrow we are talking more from the market perspective, that how market is going to react to all the situations. And taking that perspective is very, very critical, because the economy is totally linked to the stock market. And we have some of the best in India tomorrow to discuss on their perspective on how they are dealing with economy and business post-COVID. And there is also a second panel discussion, which is more like a battle, whereas on one side we have Madhu Kela, who's going to talk about the value and value trap, and Shankar is going to kind of go against him. So it's more like a battle to be watched, and it would be really interesting to take both the perspectives. So log in same time tomorrow 11 a.m. to understand that. Can you go to the next slide? what next for us? So we've been thinking that what has been been achieved in the last 5 days and what we should do next. So we have got we're going to do a detailed demo of the startups who have showcased on all the 5 days through a series of Zoom calls, which will be a little larger length only for the interested people. So we've got 500 plus interest from corporates to engage with those startups. I think with that, it gives me at least a satisfaction that we were able to kind of get an engagement here in this COVID times. So we're going to follow up on all those interests and then do a detailed demo calls for the interested corporates and the startups. You still have a demo, a poll in front of you if you're interested in kind of coming and joining those demo calls for the startups. Send in the fill in the form, and we will be sending the mails only to the interested ones. Second, we have got 350 plus interest to become a part of CorpGini exclusive corporate membership community. We will again go through the applications, do our evaluation, and then we will be sending the mail to the qualifying corporates early next week to become part of this thing, and we'll be giving our login credentials, etc. So there is a team which is working behind the scene to kind of have the technology in place so that we can send it across to you. Again, CorpGini is a platform where you will be able to look at innovation. You'll be able to partner with corporates and startups to kind of find out innovative ways in this time. Third, this has been on the request of many people who have reached out to us saying that, hey, what are we doing about, and equally there has been a lot of startups who have reached out to us that, are you going to invest too? So what we thought is that if we can create a kind of a startup crisis fund, and what I personally believe that most of the innovation, and I think in the discussion today, that the innovation comes during adversaries, and therefore this is a time where we think that a real innovative startups will emerge, and therefore we have decided to launch a crisis punch, which is a patented technology. By the way, Eric and myself, along with Ankur, we've been doing that here in US. A kind of a process of kind of a proprietary process which we've built to do a startup competition to invest in startup. So we're going to launch that in India for the first time, and we will invest through this crisis fund. So if you are an investor who's interested to participate in this crisis fund, we will be sending you more details tomorrow, and we'll kind of talk about the crisis fund in a little more detail, and send us a mail or an interest to you. And if you're a fund, then you can co-invest with us. So we'll be kind of sending more details around this. So I think with that, the last slide is on the donation. So we've been doing all these things totally free. The team has been working, but what we want is that if you think that this was really meaningful to you, you thought that you were able to take some point out of it, then do a donation. There is a link where you can do a donation or show your interest to donate. This all money will go to the Prime Minister Cares Fund, which we will donate from our end, from all the money we gather during this conference and whoever is attending these conferences. So please feel free to kind of extend your help here so that we will be able to do as much as we can from the panel. With that, Eric, we are ready to go for the startups.